Okay, we're at day 14 now in our Own It for Good program, and today we are going to talk a little bit more about science and the brain and go into the specifics of some of the chemistry of what's happening when we drink. Let's get started. Okay, now let's talk about brain chemistry and or neurochemistry as quoted from encyclopedia.com. The brain communicates with itself. Isn't that cool that it communicates with itself by sending out chemical information from one neuron or nerve cell to another? Brain chemistry is the sum of all the chemical messaging that takes place in the brain, which allows it to carry on functions such as generating movement, speaking, thinking, listening, regulating the systems of the body, and countless others. So it literally runs our lives. And the main way that it does this is by neurotransmitters. And these are those brain chemicals or messengers. And it sends signals or instructions throughout the body that control everything from our thought processes, behavior, and emotions. And we've got a little graphic over here, to show you what that looks like. And there are two main types of transmitters when you look at it from a functional standpoint. One is excitatory, and this is what it sounds like. They stimulate activity. And then there's inhibitory, which decrease activity. So from this is going to lead us into our next slide, and when we talk specifically about some of the effects of alcohol on these neurotransmitters in our brain. And these neurotransmitters are in all parts of the brain, as we learned about in our brain anatomy slide. And let's talk a little bit more about that now. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about brain chemistry and alcohol in the brain. So, we all have a sort of common surface level understanding that alcohol is a depressant. But what does this exactly look like as far as when we're talking about brain chemistry? And I've got a graphic. It's pretty dramatic. This is, and of course, when people use the term alcoholic, what does that look like? Is it somebody who's 50 and they've had hard liquor and a lot of it every day, all day? Or is it, we're in that gray area drinking where you maybe not been a moderate drinker according to the CDC, but you're not like getting drunk, from morning until night. So this is a dramatic example, but it does show you definitely that there are long-term effects of drinking on brain activity. So specifically, since we just learned about excitatory and inhibitory neurotransmitter, alcohol suppresses the production of glutamate, which is an excitatory neurotransmitter, which normally is responsible for increasing brain activity and energy levels. It also increases GABA, which is an inhibitory neurotransmitter. So it's working on both excitatory and inhibitory neurotransmitter, which reduces energy levels and calms things down. So these two combined, are what kind of slow us down, cause the slurring of words, your motor movements, everything slows down. But also at the same time, the feel-good effects of alcohol is it's working on our dopamine as well, and it increases the release of dopamine, and our brain is tricked into thinking that alcohol is responsible for making you feel good. Add this, and a lot of times um, this is also where we're going to touch a little bit on habit formation, um, that you're doing this on top of an already pleasurable experience, or sometimes as a result of stress and wanting relief from stress. In either case, alcohol starts to get the credit for the either the feeling good, the good times, rather than the good time itself that you are already having with friends and whatnot, or it gets the credit for being the healing balm, if you will, of your stress. Um, so, anyway, as we metabolize alcohol in our brain, that's why we keep kind of chasing that feel good feeling. It's because at the same time, while all of this is happening, your brain is also wanting to be in a state of homeostasis. So it's trying to balance out all of these artificially stimulated things happening with the excitatory and the inhibitory neurotransmitters and these in the dopamine. So it's creating other chemicals in the background to sort of bring everything back to homeostasis or a state of balance. Um, so then you're wanting to add more alcohol into it because you want to feel better or continue the relief. And then now you've got chemicals getting way out of balance, and then you're chasing a buzzed feeling, but that's why oftentimes you end up feeling even more tired or sleepy. Some people even get weepy and emotional because those neurotransmitters and hormones are just out of whack. Alcohol also increases the release of serotonin, or 5-HT, and this temporary boost in serotonin can make you feel happy, but over the long run with alcohol consumption, you're going to create a deficit of serotonin, which is going to increase your feelings of depression and anxiety and even cause possibly long-term depression and anxiety. So, the very thing you're going to alcohol to get the short term relief from is actually exacerbating the situation. I'm going to put a link to a good interview with a psychologist and neuroscientist named Judith Grisel. I have a quote from her here that I'm going to read, and it's this podcast, and I'll link to some other ones too. William Porter is another really good author who's written a great book called Alcohol Explained, where he talks about all of this science in detail. We're just, I'm dedicating, 10 minutes here today, but it's definitely very complex. And the molecule of alcohol is so small, and it can pass through the blood-brain barrier, and it goes straight to the bloodstream from the cell walls. So it's been something that they're still learning about, and they're still studying all the effects, because it is pretty pervasive. And so pervasive, in fact, that she actually calls it a pharmacological sledgehammer. Alcohol is such a mess. It's a tiny molecule, and it acts all over the brain in so many different pathways. It affects endorphins, as I said, and dopamine. It affects glutamate and GABA, the two primary excitatory and inhibitory neurotransmitters. It affects all kinds of ion channels. It's so small that it can act all over the place, and it's been really hard to study. In fact, we're still just beginning to understand how it is that you feel drunk, what mechanisms are for feeling drunk, because it acts kind of like a sledgehammer, or just in a widespread way to disrupt all kinds of cell functioning. So I'll link that interview. Now, she talks also about other things and compares it to marijuana use and even cocaine and opioid use, which is really interesting. But overall, it's about brain chemistry. So it's a really interesting listen. And also, I do recommend William Porter is a great one. And also Daniel Amen, who has done a lot of work on the brain and neuroscience, is another really great resource that I have learned a lot from personally. So, as you are learning more about what the chemistry actually is doing in your body, some questions to ask yourself, you know, is it really worth it? The brain is very good, and there are some natural ways from a lifestyle point of view to create these feelings that were, and now will it work as quickly as alcohol in some situations? And of course, alcohol is also a challenge because it's so socially acceptable, not only acceptable, but encouraged. Um, and, that makes it a challenge um, to be the one that is maybe looking at this and being a little bit different within your families or your social circles. But there are things like exercise, meditation, music, dancing that can create these natural endorphins and, in, exciting and activating, maybe that's a better word, activating are the appropriate excitatory and inhibitory neurotransmitters in our brain. Um, because as you can see by the brain scan images, if, if you continue down the path of using alcohol on a regular basis over the years, it will catch up with you. And do you want your brain activity looking like the picture on the right, the nice lots of green and yellow and red and blue activity, or the brain on the left that, this is what long-term alcohol use is going to do in your brain? And if this is the organ of our body that is responsible for all of our decision making, all of our emotions, all of our behavior, I think I'm going to go for the brain on the right. Even though it's going to be hard from a behavioral standpoint to make this a habit change, but understanding the chemistry is certainly very motivating, at least for me personally. So I hope it will be for you as well. So I invite you to dig a little further, Google your own articles and podcasts, and look for a few of the books and podcasts that I'll share with you as well. Um, so here's to healthy brains and making these positive habit changes for the good of our brains.